In this video, we're going to be going through a full product tutorial for Zoho CRM with a bit of a focus on some of the new updates that are included with the CRM For Everyone update that's rolling out across the board for every CRM user. So we're going to go through a handful of different sections here. First, we're going to go through a product tour where I'm just going to show you where everything has moved to, how to access some of those core areas, what the different records and modules kind of look like on the platform. Next, we're going to go into some of the specific new features that are included in CRM For Everyone. After that, we're going to jump into some of the core configurations that we as a partner oftentimes use for our clients. As you likely know, there are a ton of options and configurations. I'm going to hone in on a few of the core ones that we use in like 95% of our implementations. Next, we're going to take a look at reports and dashboards. And then last but not least, we're going to round it out with integrations. So before I jump in, I do want to ask, if you find the video useful, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. Leave me a comment with any questions and video requests, and head on over to Zenatta.com and click on book a meeting if you'd like to talk about how we can help with your Zoho installation. With that, let us jump on into the walkthrough. So here I am inside of the CRM. You'll notice things look a little bit different if you're used to the old version of the CRM. So let's kind of just take a look around and see where everything lives. So over on the left, far left, you have these different tabs. Starting at the top, we've got modules. Then we have reports. These are going to be things that look like tabular reports that we've created. We also have access to analytics and dashboards. Next, we have My Requests, which we're going to circle back to. These are kind of new in the CRM For Everyone user interface. Also have Marketplace and our global search tool. So if you are a longtime CRM user, what you'll notice is reports and analytics have kind of been moved to their own sections. What I mean by that, if we jump to the old version of the system, reports and analytics are basically just like a type of module in the UI. But as a user, you kind of know like, hey, if I'm looking at a lead and a deal, those are pretty similar to each other. When I get to a report, this is fundamentally pretty different, right? So they've moved those out to their own section just for clarity and so people can find things a little bit more easily. Down here, all the way in the bottom left, we have our unified record creation button. We have our calendar. We have our emails, so if you do have an email integration set up, you can see all of those here. We have signals, which are essentially a type of notification that can go out based on email activity, calls, or a variety of different custom triggers. And then down in the very bottom left, we have our settings. Again, longtime CRM users are going to realize this looks pretty different. You don't kind of have that grid view of settings anymore. Instead, you have this list of settings over on the left. One little pro tip that I recommend here, use that search bar, because whenever we get into a situation where we have to scroll a big list, I am always prone to missing things personally. Maybe that's just my own personal struggle, but I have found that in the new UI, I'm really relying on search a lot rather than scrolling. Couple different kind of highlight sections here. So under general is where you're going to find your ability to set up your personal settings, a lot of your company information, business hours, holidays. Under users, we can see all the various users and their roles. And then we have our calendar booking tools and motivator, which is kind of a graphical representation for your team, kind of like TV-ready dashboards for sales organizations. Under security control is where we're going to find things like profiles and roles. These essentially determine what you can do and what you can see. I'm actually going to come back and touch on profiles in a bit of detail when we get into that what's new in CRM For Everyone section a little later. As we run down, this is also where you're going to find your GDPR and HIPAA compliance, your territory management, single sign-on options as well are all going to be nested here. So important sections for some of those initial setup. Ideally, you kind of configure a lot of that stuff right out of the gate, then you don't need to worry about it too much. Channels is where we're going to find all the integrations for communication tools. So whether that's your email, your phone system through PhoneBridge, business messaging, which would be like, Line, WhatsApp, SMS notifications for internal usage, forms, social, chat, and if you do want a client portal, you can configure all of that here. Customization is where a lot of the meat and potatoes lives. So if we need to add new records or new fields to existing modules, new modules as a whole, you're going to find all of that under the modules and fields section. We're going to come back to this in detail in that customization section of the walkthrough that I talked about earlier. Pipelines, a way to manage different types of sales processes that you might be running in parallel. Wizards and kiosks being some useful tools for managing process through the system, and Canvas View if you do want to really overhaul the visual look of your system. Teamspace, I'll kind of plant the seed on. We're going to come back to this one in a little bit. This is one of my favorite kind of sections of CRM for Everyone, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. Automation, one of the things that people love the most about Zoho is the ability to automate. The workhorse of that, of course, being these workflow rules. We're going to go through and set one of these up together in just a little bit, and I'll kind of show you all the nuance that goes into configuring one of those workflows. Process management, big one here are blueprints. We set these up all the time for our clients. We've got a bunch of videos on the channel for these. We're not going to cover them in too much detail today, but just know they are one of our favorite tools for moving a record through a process with strict compliance and process management involved. Experience Center, honestly, being candid, we don't touch these three super often. Signals, like I mentioned, these are little notifications when a thing occurs, but really out of the three, that's really the only one that we're regularly using for our clients. Data admin, you want to put data in, you go to import. You want to get data out, you go to export. Data backup, you might as well set this up. This is just the ability to regularly pull all the data out of your system if you need it. Couple in here that I do always like to highlight, recycle bin. Whoops, I deleted something. Well, you can go get it as long as you do that within 60 days. Admin tools. This is actually one of my favorite little tools inside of here. I'll just show you real quick. This is really just the ability to pull either templates, views, workflows, reports that haven't been used in a certain period of time and remove them. I do this regularly for a little spring and fall cleaning in our own CRM, right? I'll go through and say, hey, we made this email template a year and a half ago. No one sent it out to anyone for 9 months. Let's just remove it. So I do really like this. And then, of course, we have that full sandbox if you need to test before making any deployments. Developer Hub, we're not going to spend too much time on here for today, but this is where a lot of your API, deluge scripts, everything beyond that layer one of customization is going to live. Zia, of course, this is where all of our different AI functionality is going to be housed. Really, Smart Prompt is where you're going to start for a lot of these. You're going to choose between Zia LLM or OpenAI with a ChatGPT integration, and this will enable a lot of functionality. Or leave me a comment down below if this is something you'd like to see more of. We've kind of put together a couple videos on AI, but thinking of just doing kind of holistic, hey, here's everything that's available right now. And then CPQ, we're going to have a video up on the channel covering this in detail, but this is just essentially a set of tools that allows you to create very custom processes and rules around the creation of quotes inside of your CRM. So I think we've done a rapid fire round there on the product tour. Again, with CRM for Everyone, don't be too intimidated. It's all the same stuff. A lot of it has just been moved to different places to try to improve the organization of the CRM as a whole. With the tour completed, let's go ahead and jump into what's new inside of CRM for Everyone. As I look at the platform, one of the first things you're going to notice as I look at my modules list on the left, CRM Teamspace here, this would be like basically the same thing that I had in that old version where every single module just lives on its own space here and I can see all of them. One of the things that I really like about CRM for Everyone is the ability to create a team space. Those of you who are power users of the original CRM, you might be going, hey, a team space where you're basically filtering down these modules, isn't that basically a tab group? Yes, it is basically a tab group. But you do have a new piece of functionality here where we can actually put modules into folders. Now, this is pretty minor. You might be going, hey, you seem a little overly excited about this. What you'll find is that in very customized CRM environments, or even in a relatively basic CRM, but where maybe the users are not like power users of CRM, being able to organize things into different buckets is extremely helpful. Right? So if I want to know about tasks and meetings, I can just open up activities. One of the big UI design tenets that we always try to follow for our clients is less is more, right? So if I'm able to group things up, I almost always want to. To set up a team space, you can go under this little section and click on Manage Team Space. Or like I was in earlier, you can always jump into your settings here and then open up team spaces. It's going to be exactly the same thing. If I create a new team space, what I'm going to do is essentially associate modules. So let's say I was making one for my customer support team, right? They might just need a handful of these because maybe they're not doing sales, so they're never going to touch leads. But they would need cases, solutions, maybe task meetings and calls, maybe products, let's say. So I can add each of those to a different team space. We'll give it a name up here at the top. Now, I always like to create folders for these. So I'd probably create a folder called customers. And in that folder, I'd want to nest my different records that are related to those particular sections. So in a customers folder, I may have accounts, contacts, and deals. So I can go ahead and just add those right in, no problem at all. Then maybe I want to have another folder for, let's call it, I'm not creative, so let's say support records. There I might put cases and solutions. And then last but not least, maybe I'd create one for activities, right? Kind of like for longtime users, you'll remember that tasks, meetings, and calls all used to be the exact same thing. They were just different, basically, fonts of the same type of record. But that organizational tool is still useful, so I can just come in here and essentially nest them under the appropriate folder. One of the nice things here, too, is that as I create a team space, I can choose if they should have access to reports and dashboards. In most cases, I do like to include that. Then we can choose who should actually get access to this. So first, who's the admin, who basically has that God mode control over the team space? And then who should it be accessible to, either based on users, roles, or profiles? I would strongly recommend that you give these permissions out based on profiles or roles rather than individual users. Basically, just so that in the future, if you do need to come in and change anything, you don't have to go in and add a user every single time you onboard somebody to a new team space, right? So just like that, if I go ahead and click save and then go back to my modules, I can now toggle over to that customer support section, and it's going to look just a little bit different. Now, one thing I do want to highlight is the way that each module works, once I open up leads, is the same exact thing, right? So if I'm coming in, I'm working a lead, I'm giving them a call, I'm converting them, all of this is exactly the same. Really, it's just changed the layout and the organizational functionality involved inside of this left-hand menu. Now, let's jump into another quick note. So inside of your CRM for Everyone user interface, if you go to create a module, you'll notice that there's two different types, org module and team module. So I'm going to show this from the settings perspective, as I think it's a bit more informative. So basically the way to think about it is you have your traditional custom module. This is exactly the same as you've had it inside of the traditional CRM user interface. And then you also have this new thing called a team module. Now, what is the difference, right? That's what you're wondering right now. You'll notice I have a team module set up called demos. Let's take a quick look at it. So if we go in to customize a team module, hey, surprise, surprise, looks identical to a normal module. But if we go to create one, we can see some of those differences. So let's create a team module here. Let's call it escalations, right? Let's say that this is something where a client is unhappy and the customer service team is going to be addressing this, linking it up and getting it to the right people. So inside of here, I can, of course, do all my field customization. So I always like to come in and just clean some of these up. We'll get rid of a couple of these fields that aren't necessary for this type of record, but the rest of them we can, of course, keep. And then let's say we want to add a few custom fields just to track what's going on with this escalation. And so we're going to add a couple little custom fields here to our case. So maybe we want to look up to the accounts module. basically be like, hey, this is the account that this escalation is for. Maybe we also want a contact here. What you'll notice is that one of the important things as you're naming these is to get the related list correct. You always want this to be the name of the module that you're adding the lookup within, right? Because what this means is when I go to a contact, I'll see a list of escalations that are linked to them. And then maybe we want to have like a description of what's going wrong. And then maybe last but not least, like a priority. I know I'm going a little bit quick here. I'm actually going to come back to module customization in just a little bit and show a lot of this in detail. So we'll say, hey, low or high priority for this escalation. Now I'm going to save this. First thing it's going to do is ask me which team space this should be added to. We can add this to a variety of different ones. So let's say I want to add it to our customer support. So CRM team space doesn't have folders, so we'll just add it to the root folder. But here I might have, hey, a escalation would be a type of support record, right? So I can nest this directly inside of that folder. Now, do keep in mind, even if this was not a team module, you could still put it directly into that folder without any issue. So let's take a second and actually talk through what exactly is different about a team module. So jumping into our module section here, once you've created that team module, you can come in and hover and click over these three dots. This is where you're really going to see the difference with a team module. So a couple things we can do. We can manage user access and we can set up requester settings. So if we were to hover over like a normal custom module here, let's say like, what's a normal? Here we go, legal notes. That's just a normal custom module. You'll see that you have module permissions, basically just what profile can access this. Within a team module, you've got a little bit more. So they're basically going to break down the different sections into a manager, a member, a participant, and a requester. Now, again, we get a little nitty-gritty here. A manager is essentially like a mini admin for this module, so they can basically view, create, edit, delete all records. The nice thing here is that you can kind of get around the traditional role and profile hierarchies and say, hey, you're a standard user in the whole system, meaning like you can't delete everything, you can't go do customization, but in your little domain, this one team module, you're kind of your own admin, right? So that's really one of the key features. Members and participants, honestly, there's a lot of overlap here between just using profiles and roles, but what this gives you the ability to do is essentially come in and view all records if you're a member, but get update permissions only for your own. A participant can view only their own records and edit their own. Lastly, you see this requesters one hovering over here. This is kind of a unique thing. Requesters are essentially people who can submit a request for a record to be created. The record kind of lives in this limbo state when it's a request up until the point where it's actually been approved. Then it creates a record. Honestly, in our implementations, we've not found a ton of use case for requesters. You could imagine a scenario where somebody is like requesting that an escalation be opened up, but then it goes to a manager to be like confirmed first. A lot of the times, being candid, I would probably just solve that with an approval process instead. So really the team module, the primary thing I would say about it is that it does give you that ability to give someone a bit of an admin-like permission set, but only for a particular module without having to set up custom data sharing rules. That would be kind of the core elements there in the CRM for Everyone user interface. Again, a lot of this is going to be pretty similar to what you've always had, but a couple of those changes, just to recap, the folders, that's kind of my favorite part about it. The team spaces, just as a more formalized way to group and organize modules. And then those team modules just to open up a bit of extra permissions for independent teams to work as mini admins within designated parts of the system. With that, let's go ahead and jump on into some of those core configurations that we find ourselves using for almost every single client. So to get started, let's jump into our settings and let's go through a couple core ones. So profiles and roles. These are very important, especially in the world of CRM for Everyone, where a couple of those customization tools are brought to the front of the system. What exactly do I mean by that? So up here in the top left, you've got this plus button. With this plus button, a user can create a new module. You might go, hey, well, that's fine. A lot of my users are not admins. They're just in my standard profile. But you might be surprised to find the standard profile actually has a ton of permissions around system configuration. So a standard user by default can actually create modules, customize modules, kind of do a lot of those back-end settings. Now, in my system, some of those have been turned off, but what I always recommend is coming in and creating a basic profile that's a bit more flexible, because now it's a custom profile where I can come in and determine what types of actions a user should be able to take, right? So that could look like view, create, edit, and delete options within a given module, some of the mass update, mass delete settings, right? So generally speaking, there's no reason that a normal user should delete a bunch of things or change ownership of a bunch of things all at once. Maybe like delete emails, right? It's like, you know what? Like if you sent an email to a client, you can't go hide it from me, right? Like I need to have that level of visibility. And then within setup permissions, one nice thing here, you can just go, no, you can't set anything up, but you might be fooled because at the end of the day, they do kind of need this email one. So a lot of times you're going through, removing a lot of these permissions for the creation and edit of the backend configuration, but maybe just leaving things like email integration turned on so that they can set up their IMAP and connect that into the system. But so one of those core configuration things that I always recommend is coming in, looking in detail at these profiles and making sure that you've set them up appropriately so that people can't do things that they shouldn't be able to. We always recommend go ahead and make them as minimal as possible. And if a user runs into something and they're like, hey, I can't do this thing, you look at what they're trying to do and you go, yeah, you know what? You should be able to do that. You can just go turn it on. Takes 20 seconds, but any open door will get used. So make sure to make these as minimal as possible and then add to them over time. Roles are going to be the hierarchical data sharing within the CRM. So the way these work is data is automatically going to be shared up in the hierarchy. So B2C sales user, if they were to own a deal, the B2C sales manager can see that deal. If a sales manager were to own one, the B2C user cannot inherently see it unless it is shared to them, right? So it just stacks up in the hierarchy to allow people to see only the things that they should be able to see. If you do need any custom settings, you can always come in and create a sharing rule, right? So if you were to say, hey, you know what? I actually do want, if a deal is owned by a manager, for them to be able to see it, you could always come in and say, hey, if something is owned by a sales manager on the B2C side, give, maybe read-only permission to that sales user, right? So you could always come in and make these custom rules, but a lot of the times, just the role-based hierarchy is going to solve for like 90% of your data sharing requirements. Next up on the list in terms of extremely core configuration are going to be some of those communication tools. So I covered these really quickly earlier, but any user can come in here, essentially create an IMAP integration where when they send an email to a client, whether it's in CRM or in something like Gmail, it's going to show up in the CRM. This just gives you that high level visibility to make sure that you know exactly what's going on. So we're going to hit this like 99% of the time for clients, unless they're in like a really compliance sensitive area where they can't have any of this data shared. Telephony is another important one. I'm actually going to click through here and get into the most important page for telephony, which is the phone bridge page. So if I go over and I click on Telephony Marketplace, if you're going to be going full in on Zoho, I strongly recommend picking a phone solution that ties in to Phone Bridge. This basically just means it's going to connect natively to CRM, Recruit, and Zoho Desk. All of these, as far as Zoho is concerned, work almost the same, so pick your favorite, but we're going to configure this a lot of the time for our clients. Now, customization, this is a really important section for getting things right for your particular business needs. So if I go into, let's say, a lead record, I've kind of showed you how to create a module already, but let's spend a little bit more time just looking at some of the configuration tools that live inside of here. So over on the left, we have a ton of different field types, everything from just like a text field to a drop-down pick list, to numbers, to checkboxes, to lookup fields, file uploads, etc. So take your time as you're going through a module and make sure that you're picking the right field type, the right kind of data. One kind of pro tip, if you can make something a pick list, basically meaning predefined options and choices, it's generally going to be a good idea. Makes it much easier to report on this data, right? So if I were to have something like engagement type here, and I go in and edit it, you could easily imagine that if this was an open text field, you might see something like new customer, new build, new construction, but all of those mean the same thing, right? So I want to pick one and lock it in, right? So that they can just choose from these available options, making sure that you kind of clean up that data so that when you get into reporting later, you're not going to suffer. Within here as well, we always like to use sections and make sure that things are into nice places. So I see these scoring fields here. I might want to create a section and call this like scoring information, right? Just so that when I go back and look at the record, it's easy for me to just like scan through, get where I need to go and see the data that's important for me. Within here as well, you've got options for layout rules, basically where, hey, if the engagement type is new build, show these additional fields. Whereas if it's renovation, those fields might not be necessary, right? So you're kind of showing and hiding things. We use quite a lot of layout rules within the system, so always recommend taking a look at these. Getting back to that idea that less is more. If certain fields aren't relevant for renovations, why would they show up for a lead where the type of lead is renovation, right? So we always just want to hide as many things as humanly possible as we're going through the system. Next, I'm going to show you workflow rules. We're going to create one as an example. So let's go ahead and create a rule where we're in the leads module. So I'm going to go ahead and set one up where when a lead is created, we're going to notify our team. So I'm going to click next. Now I'm going to show you each of these, even though we already know which one we're going to use. A record action is a create, an edit, an update, a delete. A date time, you're going to choose some type of date and say like, hey, one day after it's created, do this thing. Next will be a score. So I'm saying, hey, if a score is increased, notify me, or if it's decreased, notify me. An important one here might be like, hey, I have some scoring rules about emails being opened and closed or opened or bounced, right? And I just want some notifications as those things are occurring. And then lastly, we can set up workflows based on the notes field, which are kind of like that list of very open free-form notes that we can use as a trigger for a workflow. Now, in our case, we're going to run a trigger on the creation of a record. Here we can set up different types of filters. So I could say, hey, only run this if the lead source is, partner or seminar partner, right? Maybe this is specifically for your partner team to reach out to them. But you can have many of these. You can have and or criteria, right? So just make sure to get these locked in so that you've got the specific settings that you need. Then once I have my trigger and my criteria set up, I can determine my actions. That can be everything from updating a field, assigning an owner, adding or removing tags, sending out notifications via email or click, creating tasks, meetings, and calls, creating a record, creating a connected record, which is essentially something that dovetails off and has some type of lookup relationship. You can automatically convert if you're in the lead section, or you can do some more developer things, post webhooks, create deluge functions, or execute circuits. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and create a task. We're going to create a new task, which will be new partner lead. Follow up with them. We can set up when we want this due date to be. When we're creating tasks, I'll tell you 95% of the time it's based on the trigger date. It could also be based on like a closing date for a deal is another important one, right? Like 30 days before closing, we need to do this thing. So let's say, hey, we've got 2 days to reach out to them. Priority is high. Task owner can either be automatically assigned to the record owner, in this case, the lead owner, or it could be set up as a particular user. Lastly, we can choose to notify them via an email. Might want to do this in cases where your team is working out of inbox a lot. You just want that last kind of touch point. Now, let's take a second here, and I'm going to show you a little pro tip. what if we wanted to, when a lead comes in, maybe demo user, demo 6 here is the one who always takes partner leads, right? Well, what happens if this task is created before the lead assignment happens to occur? Well, there we might want to use a scheduled action. And I can say, hey, 1 minute after or 2 minutes after this triggers, go ahead and create that task, right? Once I've created this new partner lead task, it saves itself as a template. And so if I set up my workflow like this, I can be certain that this task, the second it's created, will be assigned to this user, making sure that that notification goes out to the appropriate person. So it's pretty often when we have like a lead or deal being created and we're running that type of assignment rule that we're going to set up a 2-part workflow like this with some type of short delay just to ensure that notification is going to go to the right person. Now, last kind of very important core configuration that 95% of people are going to get is custom views. So in my demo account here, life is easy, right? I just have these 10 example leads. As you know, you might have many, many more. And you might have certain orders of priority or approach that you'd like to encourage or enforce on your team. So to make sure that those are always followed, what we can do is come in, create a custom view, and say, let's say we want to have like partner leads. I can use my different fields. Here I'm going to say contains partner because that'll actually capture a partner lead and a seminar partner. We can then add in any of the other appropriate fields. And maybe want to add that lead source just so that we can see it. Now I can then share this to everybody or specific users and roles. And then I can lock it if I don't want other people to be able to change like the columns and settings here. So now I've added this. Now, one thing we might notice is, let's say one of these leads was, not good anymore. They didn't want to work with us. We got in touch with them, but they said no, thank you, right? So let's say this is a junk lead, for example. Now, the way that I set this up, this junk lead is still going to exist here, right? And again, not that bad because we just have 3, but as you know, you'll have many of these over time. So maybe I want to come back in and actually add another criteria, right? Maybe I want to include that lead status isn't one of those not good categories, right? That could be junk, that could be lost, that could be, not qualified down there at the bottom. So now I'll just have 2 because I filtered out some of those statuses where basically no further action is needed. Custom views are really important. We always try to recommend that people set things up kind of like an assembly line, right? So it's like, hey, when I start up for the day, I've got a couple of these different lead lists that I'm going to work through. Once they're all closed out, then I know that I'm good on my daily activities. One more little pro tip while we're in here. If you really want to lock in that assembly line type of process, you can add a filter for my last activity time. So let's say I have a last activity time where the age in days is greater or equal than 7 days. Now, this would basically mean I want to reach out to them once a week until we've hit a certain point. So let's say that I were to come in and give, this sample lead a call, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just log a call. I'm going to say that it happened in the past. If you were using your phone system, this is going to log automatically. In my case, I'm just going to say, hey, this was a 10-minute call. The outcome was prospecting and the result was interested, let's say. So with that call logged, what exactly is going to happen on my custom view? Well, we'll see that lead is no longer here, right? Because I've now actually done an activity and they're off my list. Now, if we could flash forward 7 days into the future, what you'd see is that lead would come right back onto this list, right? Because that goal is I'm going to reach out to them, I'm going to get in touch, or I'm going to try to at least. If I have a good, meaningful conversation with them, I'll convert them, and then they'll no longer be a lead, so they'll never show up on the list. But if I'm not ready to convert them yet, they can at least remove themselves from my working view until we're ready to come back in and touch that lead again. Spent a good amount of time here on custom views because I really do think they're one of the highest leverage things you can do. They're very easy to add, but they really help users work through processes in the suggested order of operations. So let's jump into our next section here under reports and dashboards. We're going to start with reports. So reports, like I mentioned earlier, are essentially a way to create a tabular view of data. Let's go ahead and create a new report with our little plus button in the top left. I'm going to start this under the accounts module. And let's say we want to have a report that looks at accounts with some deal data. It gives you this view to essentially choose parent and child records. When you choose a child, it's going to give you the option for inclusive or exclusive. So either all accounts, whether they do or don't have a deal, or only exclusive accounts, meaning I only want to see the ones that have a deal that fits certain criteria for me. Now, I can also choose additional child modules. So if I wanted to see like deals where there was a task or deals where we had a demo that had occurred, I can do that. In my case, I'm going to keep it simple just with accounts and deals. Here, I'm going to click next. I'll give this a name and we'll call it our open pipeline report. We're going to put this into that deal report section. Now, it's just going to grab you some fields here from essentially alphabetical order. I'm going to get rid of a lot of those. So now I can see I've got my account name and my deal name. Now, which things might I want to add here? So, let's just keep that account name here. I'm going to go in and add some fields from my deal. So maybe I want to have like the amount, the budget, maybe the closing dates. I'm going to intentionally skip over stage so that I can show you something in just a second here. So now that I've added those, looks like I actually removed my deal name. Let's go ahead and add that back in. That would be an important one. So I've got these added. I'm going to reorder them. So I'm going to bring deal name up to the top. And I've got my amount, my budget, and my closing date. Now, let's say I want to group these up a little bit. Well, one of the most logical groupings would be something like stage. So I'm going to add that. And just like that, now I've got 2 deals in qualification, needs analysis. These are going to kind of sort in order of your deal pipeline stages. So make sure that those are in a nice order. They should be kind of that bar moving left to right when you're inside of a deal. Now, next, I'm going to add some aggregate columns. So here, basically what these are is the ability to run sums, averages, or whatever you'd like inside of your groupings. So maybe I want to see my total pipeline amount by stage, and now I've got that included. What you'll notice is if I add an aggregate column, it's going to kind of duplicate some of these. So amount shows up here and here. So maybe I would come in and remove amount from my columns so that I have this kind of clean view into my pipeline. Now, next, I can come in and add any types of filters that I'd like. So here, one of the things I notice is this is called an open pipeline report, but a deal in here is closed lost. So it's like, hey, that's not an open pipeline. So I can come in and add any filters that I need based on that stage or particular field data. So maybe I want to do an is open. That's going to look at that forecast category. Or I can specifically exclude out, particular deal stages that I don't care about for the purposes of this report. Now I'm going to click save and our report is created. Last thing I will show you here is you can actually create a little chart. So if I wanted to see like maybe the amount by stage, I can add that really easily and I can make it any type of format that I'd like. The most obvious for me here would probably be some type of funnel report. And so I'll click save. And now I have that here listed, easy for me to see and get that view of like, hey, what's in pipeline? All of this, of course, is going to be saved for the future. So once I've created a report, I can just come in and use it again for whatever purposes I may have. I can always come back and make additional edits as well. Now, next, I'm going to jump into analytics. These are kind of like your dashboard views, right? Lots of charts and graphics. Up in the top right, we can add components. Up in the top left, I can create a whole new dashboard space. I'm going to work off of an existing one here, and I'm going to add a component. We actually have a video that goes through each and every one of these component options. We'll drop a link for that down below. But again, we've got charts, funnels, comparators, cohorts, quadrants, you name it. Zoho's been adding a ton of new functionality into here over the last year or so. It used to be like charts, KPIs, targets, and funnels. So that was basically all you had. They've added a whole bunch to it. So these are really useful. When you create a chart, you can go with a quick chart, basically meaning I'm going to pick my module, I'm going to pick my fields one by one. Or when you create a new chart component, you can choose from an existing report. So let's say I really liked that deal pipeline report that I just set up. It's going to actually pull in all of that data based on the different aggregate columns, the different groupings, and everything that I've set up. So now if I come in here and create this funnel chart, if you got a good memory, you'll remember this is exactly what it looked like, and it will link you over to that report. So as a bit of a best practice, I do actually recommend as much as possible trying to create a report, then create dashboard components based on that. Because if you just click into one of these little windows here, you get kind of a limited view. Or even more so, this one here not being from a report. If I click in, I just get this, right? But if I click through one that was created from a report, I get more data based on the fields that I've included inside of that report view. Now, lastly, let's put it all together and make this super useful. So, home pages. Homepage is a great way to kind of combine reports, dashboards, and the custom views that I showed you into one environment so that it's easy to see and look at. So if we were to create a new homepage or update an existing, let's say we have this pipeline dashboard, and this is going to be used maybe by our sales team. I can come in and either create a new one or customize an existing, and I can pull from either my dashboards. So I could go into that Deal Insights dashboard and grab that funnel report that I just created. I can put that wherever I'd like. And I can also go into places like my custom views. So let's say that partner view that we just created, and I can add that in as well. So now if I click save and I go back to my homepage, now immediately we've just deployed an insight into their data and new information about leads that they need to be working directly to the homepage. So if you're configuring this for your company, one of the things I always try to recommend is for each different role or user type, try to create them a homepage that covers a lot of those core things that they need to do. In our case, a lot of the times it's kind of top to bottom, right? Where it's like, hey, work these, get this list to 0, then get this list to 0, right? Get the next one to 0, right? Just like you would work like your inbox or what have you. Try to create this into that assembly line view so that a user can easily know everything that you expect them to do. One of the important things about CRM is you really don't want to just make it a place where you put a bunch of data and then tell people, hey, go figure it out, man. Like, you as a system designer very likely have some kind of intent on how you would like them to use the system. And so I really do recommend the homepage as one of the best ways to show them that intent, right? I want you to work this top to bottom. I want you to use these different lists. Once you've cleared all of those, then you can go get creative and chase down some different leads or deals. But implement those business rules and then demonstrate and deploy them via the homepage. So really, really do recommend that. Last but not least, I do want to cover integrations. We're going to break these into 2 different sections. So first of which, we're going to go to the Zoho integrations. These are going to be your tie-ins for a bunch of your native applications. Actually, these are under Marketplace. So under Marketplace and Zoho, we've got integrations for the majority of Zoho apps. We jokingly say all roads lead to and from CRM. So things like FSM, Projects, Desk, Click, Writer, Zoho Creator, the full finance suite, campaigns, forms, etc. Each of these basically allow for handoffs between the system. A few really common examples. FSM, you might launch a work order from a deal once the customer has signed a maintenance contract. Projects, I might launch a project using a certain template. Zoho Desk, I want visibility into my tickets when I'm inside of a customer account in CRM. I can see everything that's going on. Click, mostly used for internal notifications like, hey, your deal just closed. Great job. Go start the onboarding. Zoho Survey adds a little link that I can easily embed in an email template and send it directly out to clients. Finance Suite, this one, I'm sending estimates. I'm seeing invoices. I'm marking a deal as paid because an invoice got paid. Analytics, of course, the ability to pull all of my data into a BI environment, slice it and dice it however I need. Campaigns, I'm pulling over leads and contacts. I'm putting them into segments, and then I'm putting them into either one-time or drip email series. Forms, I actually normally set this up on the Zoho form side. It's essentially where I have a contact us form. You submit it, it lands in my system as a lead. No custom code or webhooks required. And then Zoho Sign, of course, the ability to send out a contract for signature directly from inside of the CRM. We use this all the time. Sometimes we use the native integration. Sometimes we'll build something custom. Just depends on how fast the process needs to be. We've also got integrations for Google tools. So this could be Contacts, Calendar, Google Ads, and Google Chat. One quick tip I do kind of recommend for Contacts and Calendar. I normally like to sync Contacts one way. This would be from Zoho to Google. This just makes sure that contacts aren't getting created if you have like a spam email or, Google has this tendency to create things in the contacts and you don't always want that contact inside of Zoho. A lot of times they'll just land there with like a name and an email, no company, no anything else, and you can just create a lot of junk. And then Calendar, oftentimes I'm syncing one way from Google into CRM. You could do a two-way sync here, but 9 times out of 10, again, we're going one way. Same thing with Microsoft here. We're able to sync meetings, contacts, and tasks. Of course, you've got your Outlook if you're kind of on the older school Outlook setup. And then we've got Word and Teams if you need those integrations as well. Couple native social integrations. You've got Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. All of these are supported by Zoho Lead Chain, which is essentially their way for managing inbound pay-per-click lead flow. And then last but not least is the Marketplace. The Marketplace is essentially a place where people like me or anybody can post custom plugins into the CRM. This is a really common place to find like SMS plugins. So if you want a way to like send or receive texts from inside of CRM, good example, it's here on the homepage. SMS for Cinch via, this little message media application. So a lot of times someone will come to us as an implementation partner and they'll say, hey, I'm using message media. Can you build me an integration for my CRM? And we'll say, sure, I could. Or we can just use this Marketplace app for like $10 a month. And then you don't need to pay me to build it from scratch. If you are getting into the CRM, and you're looking to integrate some of your existing tools, I always recommend checking here first and at least giving these a try, right? So you might have like a Shopify store and you want those to come in as sales orders into CRM so that you can follow up on them. It's like, hey, before you pay someone like me to build it, go ahead and check and see if one exists, maybe give it a try, because a lot of these are pretty good. One thing I'll tell you is that people are brutally honest on the ratings in the Zoho Marketplace. So if you see one that's like a 4 or a 5, you can probably feel confident to give it a try, right? And see if it fits your requirements. If you determine, hey, you know what, I need something kind of custom here, this isn't really getting it done for me, then maybe consider building something from scratch. But I really always do recommend checking here first for integrations before you go down the route of building it custom. Again, just save that budget for things that you really need, not just like build it because why not? All right, I think with that, we've kind of covered everything that we need to cover here for the CRM tutorial for this year. If you found this video useful, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. Leave me a comment with any questions, video requests, or any features in here that I didn't cover today that you think maybe deserve their own video walkthrough. And as always, my name is Tyler Colt, and I will see you next time.